Alan Isenberg was the most committed person to his community that I've ever met in my life. Every day when he woke up, he wanted to know what he could do to serve the community of Gettsville, New York. He was an incredible mentor and teacher, and he taught every EMS class he could come up with, and water rescue and everything he could in regards to fire service. He belonged to 3 or 4 different volunteer companies in regards to EMS. So there was Gettsville, there was Tri-County, and Twin City, and he worked with all of those companies in his 30 years of service at Gettsville. He was a great man. He was a wonderful family man, and he loved his grandchildren. Olivia was born 3 years before he passed away. She was 3 when he passed away, and she was his pride and joy. She loved him very much. And then Emerson, who was named as his namesake by a saying by Ralph Waldo Emerson, "If one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded," by Ralph Waldo Emerson. My grandson, our grandson Emerson, was named Emerson Allen after Irving Allen for that reason. And he just loved his family. He loved to cook, he loved food, he loved guns and ammunition, he loved America, very much so.
And he loved Lisa.
And he loved me.
He loved Lisa.
The fire service and community was his family. I was the love of his life. They were the biggest love of his life. He loved that community. We lived directly across the street from the firehouse, so you could drive out of our driveway and into their driveway, and we were there every moment of our lives. They were his family. That is who he lived and breathed every single day in his community. So he would go at the sound of the tones. He would be up and out every single time, up to the minute of his death. He would be up and out for those tones, and he did so even in the hospital. When the tones rang and we were there and he could hear them on his thing, he would open his eyes like he was going to leave. My favorite story about Irving is at his wake, actually. We had the fire services all come in to see us, and they lined up in uniform, and they came up to salute and pray and then come and speak with me. And a gentleman came up to me from the Williamsville Fire Department, and he said, "Can I tell you a story?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, years ago, about 40 years ago, he said, I was working a football field in Williamsville, and I was carrying my EMS bag, and I was walking up and down the field watching the players, and there was a little boy walking behind me, and I turned around and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "No, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm here to take care of these football players. If they get injured, I have to make sure that they're okay to go home and be with their families." And the little boy said, "Oh my gosh, could I help you?" And I said, "Of course you can. Just hand me what I need out of my bag and you can help me." And Irving was there. That was Irving. He was the child. And he went every week that summer and the next summer and the next summer until he was old enough to take a first aid course at 14 years old. And that's when he took his first aid course. But he was born to be a provider. And he was, from the time he was a little child. That's what he wanted to do. And that's my favorite story about Irving. The departments where we live are all an incredible family. So we have North Amherst and Gettsville and Williamsville and East Amherst, Clarence. And during Irving's illness, at the end of his illness, we were at Roswell Park Cancer Institute for quite a long time, 5 or 6 weeks while he was passing away. And during that time, hundreds of people came up to see him in the Institute, and they came and they prayed and they cried and they told stories of all of the years of service that he was in, and they were amazing. And the night he passed away, he died at 10:03 that night, and I was at the hospital till probably around midnight. And I went home, and when I got home, across the street from my house where the fire hall was a group of about 60 people, and they were draping the hall in black drapes and turning the lights all over to red that same evening that he passed away at midnight. And they were there for hours turning that over. And the next morning when I woke up, which I can see across the street from my home, was his gear all seated at a table with a spotlight on it in a huge sign that said "In Memoriam of." And it sat there for many, many months. And it was beautiful. And they have been like that. And they brought me food and they made calls and dropped off cards forever after he passed away.
They also equipped her home so that Irving could get in and out. They built a wheelchair ramp in the garage. They widened the doors. They made sure he had all the equipment he needed to maintain as much normalcy as he could. They moved the couch and made it into a bed so that he could stay home, and it was easier on Lisa because Lisa was struggling with a shoulder injury at the time, and they were her family, and I will be forever grateful.
The last night that I took Irving out of the house to take him to the hospital before he never actually came home, I called over to the fire department and I asked them for their help. And I said, when I bring Irving home the next time, because I thought he was going to be going for another bone marrow transplant, he was a bone marrow cancer patient. I said, the next time I have to take him out, I'm not going to be able to get him in and out of the house. I'm going to need a ramp. Can you guys help me, please? And within 2 days, they had come to my home and they had built a ramp actually in my garage. And I took a picture of it and I took it to the hospital and showed it to Irving, but he actually never made it home to use the ramp, which is still there. And but they were there. They were there within that night, and within 2 days, they had a ramp built at my house for him. And they were always there every single moment from the time that he joined until the day that he died. And even now, they are still there, the fire service. When people remember Irving and speak about Irving in regards to his service and who he was, they always talk about his sense of humor. They always talk about his want to respond to any situation. He was always first there. He always had what he needed, and he always knew how to respond. The lives he saved in our community were immense, and there are people there now who he has taught and he has mentored and he has saved lives, who will be there carrying on his legacy and carry on everything he left for so many years to come. And that is so comforting to me to know that they are there around me, still carrying his energy and his life within them. I was speaking with him a day before he died, maybe 2 days before he passed away, and he was in and out of consciousness. And I asked him if he was sorry that he attended 9/11 because he had 3 cancers from that site. The first cancer being a thyroid, and then the second being multiple myeloma, the bone marrow, and the third cancer was the leukemia. And I asked him if he was sorry he went, and he said, not even for one moment. He said, if those tones went off right now, he said, I would go, because those are my people and those are my country and they needed me, and I would go right now. And he would have gone that night. He would have gone any night. And that is one of my favorite things about him that I think about a lot. I think you need to know that he loved his grandmother Lillian very much so. She was the light of his life, and she lived to be 104 years old. And she was always there to support him and did what he needed, and he did what she needed, and he was always there. And so everything we have is about Lillian. So he has a car that when we received it, he called it Lillian. And we have another part of our lives that we have a foundation that protects our property that we have named LilyPad 104 after her name and her age, because Lillian was extremely important to Irving. So I think it's very important to know that his family was important to him that way. He was the youngest child of 3. He had 2 older sisters, and he was the only boy in his family. And his grandmother told his mother when he was born, I'm so happy you're pregnant, she said to his mother. You do know that if it's a boy, you have to name him Irving. And so his name ended up being Irving. Because if one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded.
Here's to you, with that smile on your face. Here's to you.